Hey, I'm Mr. Williamson, and we're going to talk about carbohydrates in this video. Make sure you're taking notes. Make sure you ask questions, even if just to yourself. Let's get started. First of all, the properties of carbohydrates. All carbohydrates have a chemical formula of 1 part carbon, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. Normally, it would be called, we'd talk about it like C6H12O6. C6H12O6. That is the formula for all carbohydrates. We'll talk about why it's going to be the same, but they're all different. Each of those units, this unit, the CHO, C6H12O6, is called a saccharide. All right, and this goes back to the last video we watched where we talked about mono and versus poly. A monosaccharide is the monomer of a carbohydrate. In other words, it's one unit of a carbohydrate. If we put a bunch of those monomers together, we end up with a polymer or a disaccharide or a polysaccharide. You could even have trisaccharides, but one of them is called a monosaccharide. More than one would be polysaccharide. We're talking about disaccharides, polysaccharides, things like that. All right. Monosaccharides are the simplest form of carbohydrates, and they all have that same formula. They all have the formula of C6H12O6. All right. We get glucose from plants. That is what we base all of our energy on. We base them on plants. Plants produce glucose. We eat the plant, or we eat something that eats the plant. But if we eat the plant, we get the glucose. But that is the formula for the simplest form monosaccharide, the glucose that we eat. Okay, it looks like this. You can see let's see if I can do this. C6, so there should be 6 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 6th one is there. That's C6. H12, there's 2, 3, there's another one here, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and I've kind of cut off the one over here. That's 12, C6H12O6. So we need an O6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's C6H12O6. The monosaccharide that we get our energy from is called glucose. No, you do not need to worry about the structure or anything like that. You do need to know C6H12O6. That's important. That's kind of a key to biology and the formula of respiration. Fructose is a monosaccharide that is the sweetest. When you eat fruit, that's why all fruit is, well, most fruit is really sweet. It has a sugar, a carbohydrate called fructose. What's the chemical formula? C6H12O6. Same exact formula. So how is it that we can have fructose, which has the same formula, C6H12O6, and glucose, same formula, and have them be different? All right. First, let's take a look at it. So we have C6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here's the 6th one. We have H12, 1, 2, 3. There's one here I left off. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then this would be the 12th one. And then we have O6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. C6H12O6. Same thing, but you'll notice that fructose looks a little different. That's because it's called an isomer. It's an isomer. An isomer is something that has the same formula, C6H12O6, but it has a different structure. Okay? So in this case, we can see glucose there. We already talked about that. And when we put it with fructose, They look different, but they both have the same formula. I went over both of these, C6H12O6, but they have the same formula, but a different structure. Galactose is another monosaccharide. Galactose is the one over on the left, this one here. And when we combine it with another one, like glucose, we end up with a different saccharide, a disaccharide called lactose, but we'll talk about that in a minute. All right. Disaccharides are where we take two saccharides through the thing called dehydration synthesis. Dehydration means to lose water, and synthesis means to make. So we're making a new molecule by removing water. And we've got a whole activity we're going to take a look at in a day or two. Sucrose is the glucose and fructose put together. So we talked about glucose, C6H12O6, we get it from plants, and fructose, which is the sugar that's found in fruits. When you combine those two, and I mean like actually physically combine them, removing a water molecule, which we'll talk about, and making a new molecule which actually has twice as much, as like C12H24O12 or something like that. And that's basically table sugar. Lactose is galactose and glucose, and I showed you that, okay? This is sucrose. You can see where we've taken the fructose and the glucose and put them together. We've removed the water. If we actually really count these, you're going to see that we are removed two hydrogens and an oxygen. And to do that, it basically kind of looks, we have on fructose, on the original, we would have had an H up here and an OH down there, and this is the carbon. And on the glucose, you have, let's just make this up, the H there and an OH up here, and this is the carbon. All right. Well, to combine them, we need to be able to bond them together. So what we're going to do is take away one hydrogen up here and one OH up there, and then we can actually still get those two to bond together, combining the connecting the molecules, which is what happens here. All right. But what we took out was H2O. We removed water from that molecule. When we take galactose, same structure, C6H12O6, and we combine it with glucose, we end up with a thing called lactose. All right? In your body, actually, when we drink milk or we eat dairy products, people who are lactose intolerant, your body can absorb this molecule. It's not capable of it. So our body has an enzyme, we'll talk about enzymes in the future, is an enzyme that breaks this bond, breaking it back down to galactose and glucose. And your body can absorb that. If you don't have that enzyme, you're lactose intolerant, and that's what gives you the gas, the diarrhea, things like that, because this irritates your bowels and your the flora and fauna in your intestine and causes you gastric distress. But lactose is the glucose and galactose put together. So what's a polysaccharide? Polysaccharide is where we take two or more saccharides bound together, and we have three kinds that we usually talk about in class. Glycogen is used to store glucose in animals. You store glycogen in your liver. That's what you're trying to restore if you're into marathon type sports, long distance or long time events. You store glycogen in your liver, and when you've used all the glucose in your blood, then you start draining the glycogen in your liver and in your body, and you can, if you deplete that, that's when you run into issues with, like in a marathon runner running into the wall or something like that. But basically it's stored in branched chains, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a minute. Starch is used to store energy in plants, and we happen to like it because it's in potatoes and a few other things. It's long chains also. And then cellulose is again made out of glucose in long chains. All right, so what are we looking at here? Well, glycogen, that's glycogen. Everything there is everything except that colored part right here in the middle. Let's see. Right there. All of that is glycogen. So everything out here, long chains, and you can't really see them because the picture is really small, but each one of these little things right here is a glucose molecule. And there's probably hundreds of them in that molecule. Starch, all right, stored in plants, potatoes, probably the most popular. We can extract that and we can get starch. That's how you get corn starch and things like that. And corn starch is brought from corn. And then finally, cellulose is derived from wood. You take a piece of wood, look at it, that's what you get. You pulp it, you get the fibers out of it, which are all cellulose, and then you compress it, and you end up with a thing like paper. Okay? That's what paper's made out of. It's cellulose, long strings of glucose. All right? Starch, as you can see up here, is just one long chain of glucose. Each one of these is a monomer glucose. All right? But basically it's one long chain. Cellulose, we've taken that same molecule, glucose, the same thing we eat, and we've changed the location. And don't worry, again, you don't need to know this, but I'm just showing you the differences. We've changed the orientation of each one of them. So this one is up, that one is down. And when you take chemistry, you would learn the difference between those and everything. And glycogen is like we talked about in the carbon video. You've got these long branch chains, and they would continue to branch out and everything, like you saw in that other video or another image from the earlier slide. Okay, so that's carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are used to store energy for cells. We use them like most primarily glucose and starch or some form of those. Our body utilizes them to get energy, to change that energy into energy that we can use and process to keep us alive. But hopefully the takeaways on this, you should know what the monomer of a carbohydrate is. The monomer of carbohydrate, try that again, take two. The monomer of a carbohydrate is a saccharide. If you put two together, you get a disaccharide. You put a bunch of them together, you get a polysaccharide. And an isomer is the same structure, the same function. Wow. An isomer is the same formula, but a different structure. That's where I showed you like glucose and fructose. Very similar, same formula, different structure. Man, I got to get this right. Same formula, different structure. That would be an isomer. That's what makes them different. Our body can only break down glucose because that's the structure that our enzymes work on. We can eat fructose, and I'm not sure, but we might be able to change it into glucose. We have enzymes that might do that, but we can't break that down, and I'm not real sure about that. And then we also looked at glycogen and starch and cellulose, long chains or branch chains of glucose in different structures. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. Put them in if you're on Edpuzzle. Put them in your question or ask them in class. I hope you took good notes. Take a look at them later. Good luck.